Keystone Wilds is certainly off to a successful start, and all of our animals, as well as our staff, are happy with their new home. As the property continues to grow, expenses follow suit. Keystone Wilds is still using Keystone Park as a financial lifeline, and unfortunately, Keystone Park is starting to feel the pay cuts. So far, thankfully nothing major has malfunctioned, and our polar bears are still in their habitat. Sadly, the polish that Keystone Park used to have simply isn't there anymore, and unfortunately, guests are starting to take notice. Broken facilities, small messes, little things like this are absolutely unacceptable on Keystone grounds, so we're gonna have to come up with a creative way to get a little bit more money circulating, and luckily, we found an excellent solution. In case you're new here, welcome to Keystone Wilds, our newest project here under the Keystone franchise, and so far, we've built two excellent exhibits. The first is a breeding program for the giant Anteater, starring series veteran Bear. Unfortunately, however, Bear may be on his way back to his original home at Keystone Park ahead of schedule, as Anita, the female giant Anteater, has become pregnant far ahead of schedule. This is absolutely excellent news, and the first major win for Keystone Wilds since construction first began. Giant Anteaters stay pregnant for quite a long time, so for the time being, it's likely that Bear will stay in our custody here at Keystone Wilds just in case anything were to go wrong. Bear and Anita have seemingly grown quite close, which is particularly rare among the typically solitary species. Separating the two already could create stress in the early stages of Anita's pregnancy, which isn't good for anyone involved. For now, no decision will be made until a little bit more time has passed and we have more information. In case you missed the last episode and most recent expansion to the zoo, we built a sizable habitat for two nimble gibbons. Meet Stevie. He tends to spend a majority of his time on the move like most gibbons do, but he also enjoys to venture down to the forest floor and play with his favorite toys. His best friend Echo is more of the same. You can tell her apart by her much darker coat of fur. Just like Stevie though, she's always on the move high up in their habitat. Sadly, just like our giant anteaters, Lar gibbons are also endangered with only 15 to 20,000 estimated to be left in the wild. While neither Stevie nor Echo have shown any signs of mating behavior, we're hopeful that one day, a third, much smaller gibbon will one day roam the courses of their habitat. Connected to their excellent enclosure is Keystone Wilds' first gift shop, which also happens to be one of the solutions to the zoo's dire financial distress. In hopes to build up hype for Keystone Wilds and to feed off guest nostalgia for Keystone Park, we have officially decided to open our gift shop's virtual store. Like, in real life. The store is open right now. You can find it using the link in the description below, as well as the channel description. We have a variety of products starring animals of Keystone Wilds and some generic Keystone Wilds and Keystone Park products so far. More will be added each week, so be sure to check in and find something you like. A percentage of profits are going to be donated to real-life conservation efforts that are aiming to help our animals that we house at Keystone Park, as well as Keystone Wilds. It truly amazes me that this small and niche community that we've built by our own hands is now large enough to potentially be able to help animals in the real world. It's super special, and I can't thank you guys enough. Also located in Keystone Wilds' gift shop is a brand new family of hatchling Herman's tortoise. These vulnerable reptiles are sure to bring in guests and give them something excellent to look at besides our top-tier merchandise. When discussing future expansions to Keystone Wilds with some of our more veteran staff, the Keystone Park crew audibly gasped when reading our newest plans. A few years ago, Keystone Park unfortunately dealt with a severe strain of the avian flu influenza, stemming from our local flock of king penguins. Thankfully, all 21 of the penguins managed to survive relatively unscathed. However, this event took a massive mental toll on the zoo staff, and was by no means simple to handle. Long hours, stressful nights, and constant worry would take a toll on anybody. However, after extensive testing in our quarantine facilities, I do believe that Keystone Wilds is ready for its first avian flock to officially join our roster. If you'd like to further support the construction of Keystone Wilds and our latest expansions, then consider becoming a member of Club Keystone. The link is in the description below. Not only will you receive early access to videos, but you'll also get your name forever on the wall of donors. Thanks to all of our current members for the endless support. We truly couldn't do it without you. If you enjoyed today's video and the continuation of our newest adventure, consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment too. By engaging with the video in any way, you're telling YouTube to push the video to more people. The more people that watch, quite simply, the more videos I can make at a higher quality. We're growing such a wonderful and excellent community here, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. You guys seriously are the best. 469,760. That is an oddly specific number to describe the wild population of the little penguin. Thankfully, with a wild population that high, the IUCN considers them a least concerned species, which is a first for Keystone Wilds. Little isn't just in their name. Their land requirement as well as their water requirement are both minuscule. What sets them apart though is that they're one of the few species in the game that requires deep water. Thankfully, they're so small, the water doesn't have to be too deep to pull this off. It appears that the little penguin are very social animals, needing a minimum requirement of 6 members in their group. It also looks like they're really easy to breed in captivity and don't stay pregnant for very long at all, so if we're not careful, the population can get out of control fast. Contrary to popular belief, most species of birds are actually exceptionally intelligent, so they're going to need a variety of habitat enrichment items. The Zoopedia also went out of its way to mention again that the little penguins can dive at incredible depths, so this deep dive is going to have to be important to their habitat. For the first time in Keystone Wilds, the little penguin doesn't benefit from sharing habitat space with any other species, but now we know exactly what we need to do to make the habitat a success, so let's get to it. With the release of the virtual store, I'd like to work towards the gift shop in today's episode. I'm thinking we can go in the plot of land right between the gift shop and the coffee shop we made in the very first episode. The main draw and gimmick of this habitat is that there's going to be two completely different elevations and viewings. We're going to have underwater viewing right here, with steps that take you down beneath the surface, and above the surface viewing right here. Overall, a relatively simple and easy plan, but when you're working with water, nothing is ever that easy. Trust me. If you'll recall from the Zoopedia, little penguins need deep dive in their habitat. It's an absolute requirement, and if you don't know what this means, effectively the water that you give them has to be a certain depth. All penguin species in Planet Zoo fall under the 2-meter requirements, so this water level has to be at least 2 meters deep. This is exactly why I placed this piece of Arctic wood on the ground. It's exactly 2 meters tall. We're using it as a makeshift ruler, so if the water level exceeds the Arctic wood, we know we made it deep enough for the penguins to swim. I preemptively lined up the habitat with the ground level of Keystone Wilds, so all we have to do is flatten the foundation all the way to the Arctic wood, and hopefully we got deep enough. We're not necessarily going to use all of this ground. It's always easier to make a little bit bigger of an area than you need whenever working with water, because it can be a little bit janky. Where the little penguin's pool is planned to be, I'm going to change the terrain. This is going to give me a visual indicator of where I'm building. If you're curious as to how I can edit the terrain all the way up to the path, it's because the real path is further back. Remember, this limestone is fake for the most part. Knowing I was going to use the in-game barrier glass for the border of this habitat, I decided to line the foundation of some concrete. Once everything was finalized, I laid the Arctic wood at the base of the pool to be. I then started lining the perimeter of the habitat with the in-game barrier glass. I think it looks really nice, and most importantly, it's watertight. Remember, this part of the habitat is specifically designed to be above the surface viewing, meaning that visitors should be able to easily see over the glass. After the glass was finally in place, I popped up the terrain all over the border of the habitat to make sure it was watertight. This isn't necessarily final, I just want to make sure the habitat and the water function correctly. It didn't. The way I always like to ensure that my builds are watertight is I'll make the glass physically intersect the terrain so there's no way for the water to escape. Alright, moment of truth. Alright, well this is an issue. The water level can't go any higher, it's not at the top of the glass, and the top of the Arctic wood isn't covered, so that means the penguins wouldn't be able to deep dive in this. The first solution I thought of was to simply drain all of the water and make the glass a little bit taller. I then tried the exact same thing again, hoping the glass wouldn't be too tall from the outside. I then tried to lower the glass to be exactly even with the Arctic wood that was already a little bit off the ground. Oh yeah, thanks for letting me place the water out here, that's really helpful. I was starting to run out of ideas fast, so I completely scrapped all of the terrain that we already built, redid the glass entirely, and then tried the water. Eventually I realized it was pointless to fight the water level, so I simply made the habitat a little bit deeper. I'm pretty sure that's the most tedious thing we're going to have to do in this entire build. Eventually, after many habitat revisions, I finally came up with a design I was happy with. It's a bit tricky to see, but the Arctic wood is clearly well below the water's surface, which means the little penguins are going to be able to functionally deep dive. Looking at the habitat from above, admittedly it did turn out pretty much exactly how I wanted it, with the underwater and the above surface viewing. It just took about everything I had to get to this point, so now we definitely can't screw it up. Personally, I think it's going to be easiest to start with the underwater viewing. It's the furthest away from the main bulk of the habitat, so this is almost like its own thing. The first step of preparing the underwater viewing was lining the entire path, including the stairs, with limestone. Remember, whenever using the fake path trick, you don't always have to be precise. We can always hide this later by adding some terrain, planters, or even fake walls. We'll certainly detail this a lot better later on in the process, but for now I want to get everything laid out in the basic form, just so we know exactly what we're working with. I used a lot of square mulch patches from the Nature tab to cover up what we've built so far. When it got a little bit more narrow, I transitioned to smaller squares to come to a fine point. To help retain the mulch and blend it into the rest of Keystone Wilds, I used a lot of the European rustic stone walls that we've been using frequently on the other side of the zoo. It may be a bit tough yet to see the vision, but I'm really happy with how this is turning out. I think I would like to stay down here for now though, and fully detail up everything that we've built so far before starting something new. I want this area to heavily contrast the left side of the zoo, which is a lot more lush and vibrant. We're going to be using some drab colors for this build. The standard aquatic faux rock turned out to be the exact perfect color I was looking for, so I used this to cover up any imperfections in the path that we'd made so far. I used more of the faux rocks to line the entirety of the concrete foundation that we just made. I really like the uneven and imperfect texture this is giving off. It makes it appear a lot more natural, even though we're using faux rocks, which are completely fake. I then recolored the gutters from the conservation pack a white to match the glass. All I'm trying to do is beef it up just a slight bit to make it look that much more formidable. Shifting my attention back to the faux rocks, I lined the wood of the stairs with the thinnest faux rock I could possibly find. I then duplicated this up and used some Australian wood to blend the two pieces together, making a convincing handrail. I then placed the education board right next to the little penguin's pool and lowered the rock to further blend it in. I was really liking the look of the faux rocks in this habitat, so I came back up to the top and used it to blend in this ugly wood piece. At this point, the base of the build desperately needed some colors, so I used this Australian wooden map almost as a floor, to where the limestone is just peeking through it. I also kept one of the Australia pieces completely intact, acting as a little Easter egg to show the heritage of the little penguins. I then mashed the color by lining the inside of the concrete with the Australian wood, and blending it in between the wall and the faux rocks. This is looking a lot better already, but there's still plenty of work we can do on the outside of the build. I went ahead and planted a fine layer of buffalo grass on the mulch that we've already placed, and now we can actually use it. I placed a small pot in the top right of the underwater viewing, and inside I planted a ghost gum sapling, a tree native to the Australia region. It always amazes me just how quickly a build can start to take shape. I'm really liking this so far. From here, we added the standard Keystone Wilds foliage palette, always starting at the aquatic faux rocks recolored to a realistic hue. Since we're building on the back of the coffee shop, I was also careful to copy and paste some details over from the front, so it didn't look like a blank wall of plaster. I then wanted to make a nice sign that guests would see as soon as they entered Keystone Park, so I first borrowed the template from the Club Keystone sign. I first spelled out the words of the sign using a black color. This is going to appear as the shadow. I then copy and pasted the entirety of the sign's wordage in Keystone Park signature yellow, using the black as an outline. I really like how it turned out. It's going to give guests an excellent first impression upon entering the zoo. And speaking of first impressions, this is beginning to become an excellent starting habitat. I think it makes sense to start working on the backstage now, but where it's going to be positioned is a bit awkward because I don't want the guests to be able to see it. We're going to have to get creative with covering it up because it's clearly in plain view. Obviously we can't hide what we haven't built, so I started off by completely flattening the entire foundation. In Keystone Wilds, I want every single backstage and staff area to look relatively uniform, so I borrowed the palette that we already used in the backstage of the giant Anteater area. In order to hide the build from the public, I purposely staggered some of the walls. This is going to make sense later, but I also didn't want the build to be perfectly square. This is a common pitfall I frequently fall into, and it's not realistic to have every building be a square or a rectangle. Remember, we're building for a species that literally has the word little in its name, so this backstage doesn't have to be huge. After the framework was done, I added the habitat gate and ran a path all the way around the backstage. Once all of the infrastructure was finally complete, I was able to add the null barrier to the rest of the habitat, mainly connecting it to the glass that we already built. I'm pretty happy with the exterior shaping, but for now I think we need to focus on the interior. First things first, we need to get rid of this ugly rock floor. I replaced it with an ugly concrete floor. Remember, this is a backstage and guests are never going to be back here. You have to prioritize function over looks. It's perfectly acceptable and almost encouraged to give the backstages an entirely different vibe than the rest of the habitat. You want to prioritize function over appeal, because who are you appealing to back here? Nobody's back here except staff. Not bad at all. From the keeper hut it looks really nice, and there's even some food in the habitat ready for the little penguins. Out here, however, the build looks less than stellar. We're going to have to find a way to change this, and I think I have an excellent solution. Let's get to it. We're going to be disguising the backstage using the exact same faux rocks as before to make the entire build appear as an Australian coastline. The main thing to keep in mind is make sure that none of the rockwork is piercing the walls. There's no collision detection in Planet Zoo like this. In theory, we only have to hide half of the building since the guests are only ever going to be able to see it from this angle, so this actually didn't take very long. The trick to rockwork in Planet Zoo, and especially when using faux rocks, is to make sure you have a bunch of different and creative angles. You get this by using a bunch of different rocks of the same family. Typically I would recommend turning on random rotation to accomplish this, but since I want these rocks in very specific patterns as to not impede the traversable area of the little penguins, I chose to go without for this build. Lastly, I added some mulch in areas where I knew I wanted foliage. It's realistic to have the mulch on top of the rocks, but you have to have something before you place the plants. It's tough to tell the backstage is even here after all the rock work we did, and I really like how it turned out. Once we add some foliage, it's going to look even better and mask some of the rockwork's imperfections. The shaping of the backstage also turned out pretty good. We were successful at not letting the rocks peek in. For as difficult and challenging as this build was at the start, I'm really pleasantly surprised with how it's turning out, but we still have a little ways to go before it's entirely finished. I'd like to start by detailing an often neglected aspect of a lot of builds. Detailing bodies of water is very similar to detailing land, in which first you have to carve out what exactly you are detailing. What I mean by this is first I like to build up a coastline. Not only does this make what I actually have to detail underwater a lot smaller, but it also gives a clear blueprint as to where to go and what to detail first. Once the coastline is officially in place, we can then start to place the exact same faux rocks underwater, but carefully blend it into the terrain and the rocks of the matching color. By gently tapping instead of holding down the button to place terrain, you can get pretty interesting patterns that almost appears to mix all of the terrains together. This is more realistic. To help the little penguins get in and out of the water a little bit easier, I added these jetty bedding platforms to the coastline. They even match colors of the faux rocks. One of my absolute favorite details in the entire build was this submarine buoy enrichment item that I tried to recolor to match the Australian flag. I added a few sprinklers and other enrichment items across the coast of the habitat as well. Shifting my focus beneath the surface again, I added a lot of the small faux rocks all around the bottom of the pool. These are going to help blend in various aspects of the habitat together. Where I placed a lot of the small faux rocks, I anchored a lot of the underwater temple plants. I think these look really nice and contrast really well with the underwater eelgrass. Underwater eelgrass is basically just the buffalo grass of the sea. It's really effective and it looks quite nice. It even sways in the current. To help habitat clarity, I added some aquatic lights beneath the surface connected to the concrete. This is really going to help light the place up. I then added some bubble special effects to key areas where a lot of foliage was present. Unfortunately, not every build is perfect in real life. Adding some wear and tear can really add that much more realism. I really like to utilize the crack decals from the Europe pack. A simple design for a simple habitat. I really like how it turned out. We packed so much detail into such a small place, and the little penguins certainly are going to enjoy it. However, now we have to finish the rest of their habitat, and I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit more difficult. In all honesty, the habitat looks like it's relatively close to being done already, which is a surprise. Normally habitats don't look this complete without a little bit of foliage, but I quite like the direction this is going. Step 1 of plant work is always the same. Add some buffalo grass over the mulch. I'd never used them before until now, but I've grown really fond of using these cabbage trees. This build was actually quite interesting to construct because typically rockwork is complementing the foliage in terms of a palette, but in this case the foliage is actually complementing the rockwork. It's not often that the rockwork is the main draw of the habitat. Every single piece of greenery in the entire build is meant to complement the rocks in some way, whether it's adding detail to them or helping them blend into the terrain. Once a majority of the foliage was finally in place, I extended the path out a little bit more to give guests one extra viewing area of the little penguins. All I did over here was use the exact same limestone trick to cover up the path, and then use some aquatic faux rocks to blend it into the habitat. It was really easy. Outside of placing the actual water, this habitat came together incredibly quickly, but we didn't shirk on any details. I really like how it turned out, and I'm quite proud of the final result. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There are still, however, 6 things missing from the habitat, but I have a feeling that this problem's going to solve itself very soon. Now, in fact. Whoever named these penguins really wasn't joking. These things are quite small. Luckily, upon entry to their new home, the flock immediately began deep diving into their new waters. This is great news. It means we built the habitat right and don't have to mess around with water physics for at least another week. Jokes aside though, it's absolutely stunning and marvelous to watch the entire flock of 6 little penguins swim about in their new home. Truly a beautiful sight. To build up some hype for Keystone Wilds, we've even included a habitat webcam that's live right now. The webcam is amazing and good for guests that can't make it out to Keystone Wilds in person. However, seeing it in person truly is stunning. This is some of our best architectural work to date. It's so highly detailed and so rewarding to see the penguins this close up. For as difficult as it was to build, I don't think the underwater viewing could have turned out much better. We also managed to keep one final surprise from you. If you'll notice, one of our little penguins is very special. There's no blue at all on her. That's because she's an albino, a very rare skin pigment mutation. Albino animals are incredibly rare to find at zoos because it's not likely that they can survive in the wild due to not having any camouflage in their home region. This penguin truly is a beauty and a special sight to behold. If you have any name suggestions, like usual, feel free to leave them in the comments below. While you're in the comments, don't forget to suggest animals for Keystone Wilds. I don't really plan these episodes too far in ahead. In all honesty, I was going to build for the mute swan this week until I took a last minute turn. I certainly am glad I changed my mind, however. The little penguins are so cute, and I'm really happy that they're a part of the Keystone Wilds roster. If you like little penguins as much as I do, don't forget to check out the virtual shop. With the launch of this episode, we also launched a bunch of little penguin merchandise. As of right now, I plan to update the shop one time per week with new merchandise of the Animal of the Week. Unfortunately, I do think that's where I'm going to have to call it for today's episode. It was a bit of a shorter one for a small habitat for an even smaller animal, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys again so much for all of your support. It truly means the world to me, and I'm so privileged to be in this position to where I can provide content for you guys for you to enjoy. Thanks so much again. Kingpin out. I'll see you guys next Saturday.